He stopped telling the plans. He stopped complaining. He stopped reacting. And that's when everything started to happen. Coincidence? Or was the universe waiting for his silence to act? It all started on a random Tuesday. It wasn't raining. There were no omens. But inside, he felt it. Something was changing. David, 36, lived a seemingly ordinary life in rural Oregon. Video editor, introspective, one of those who observe more than they talk. His apartment was orderly, his days predictable, but his soul was tired. It was a different tiredness. Not physical. It was as if he was trying to get somewhere, but the path always fell apart before his feet. For years, David sought answers in spiritual books, motivational videos, manifestation courses. He believed that if he followed the right rules of the universe, his life would finally flow. But it seemed like the more he tried, the more stuck he became. Opportunities slipped away. Relationships were repeated with new people, but old pains. And what consumed him most was the silence. The silence that came after another failed attempt. The silence that left questions unanswered. The silence inside him. Until one night, he just stopped. Not out of wisdom, but out of exhaustion. He didn't complain. He didn't ask. He didn't react. He remained silent. And it was exactly there that something began to change. Small coincidences, subtle signs, a different energy in the air. It was as if the universe had been waiting for this moment. But before I continue, I need to tell you, this story is real. The names have been changed to protect the identity of the person involved, but everything you will hear here really happened. And maybe, in some way that you don't yet understand, this is your story too. Answer me honestly. Have you ever felt like you're trying too hard, and yet nothing changes? Have you ever had the impression that you are in an invisible cycle, where every attempt seems to come to nothing? Do you feel like the universe has forgotten you? Or worse, that it is silent? If any of these questions resonate with you, comment below. I feel trapped, but I want to understand why. Your comment is more than an outburst, it's a call. Watch this video until the end. What happened to David reveals something that no one tells you about silence, vibration, and the true power of co-creating reality. And if this is already moving you, leave a like now and subscribe to the channel. There's someone out there who needs to hear this too, and you can be the conduit. Now, let's get to what really happened. For years, David tried. I made lists, plans, vision boards. I wrote phrases like, "I'm prosperous," and "everything flows in my life" on posts it spread around the apartment. He spoke enthusiastically about his goals to friends, acquaintances, even strangers. It was as if verbalizing your dreams was part of the creation process. But whenever a project started to take shape, something got stuck. The energy disappeared. The path curved. A customer disappeared. Equipment broke. A misunderstanding ruined a good contact. It was as if there was an invisible force blocking everything. As if life was saying, "Not yet." At first, he thought it was bad luck. Then he began to distrust himself. Was he not good enough? Was he sabotaging himself without realizing it? Doubt grew, silently, like a crack in the glass of trust. And then, one morning when he couldn't sleep, he clicked on a random video on his cell phone. I didn't remember the title. Neither does the channel. But one sentence stuck in his mind like a persistent whisper. The universe responds to what you vibrate, not what you say. It didn't make sense at first glance, but it was uncomfortable. Because, deep down, it seemed to say what he already suspected, that perhaps he was saying one thing, but feeling another. Over the next few days, David became more observant. He noticed how much he talked about his plans, but inside he carried anxiety, fear of it not working out, the need to prove something to someone. It was an invisible noise between what he said and what actually vibrated. So, he made a decision that, at the time, didn't even seem that big. He decided to remain silent. Don't count. Don't explain. Don't justify. He started a new project, but this time, quietly. Without advertising. No posting. Without asking for validation. He did everything in his own way, as if he were protecting that seed from the external wind. And that's when everything started to change. Ideas flowed easily. Solutions appeared before problems. A week later, someone he hadn't seen in months got in touch offering help. Another person, who I didn't even know, offered a free service. Then, an unexpected email with a proposal he didn't even remember sending. It was as if everything was being orchestrated in silence. Effortless. No charge. Money appeared in unlikely ways. Opportunities arose without him having to chase them. And the most curious thing, all of this started precisely when he stopped trying to force the universe to listen. When he stopped counting. When he stopped complaining. When he stopped reacting. But even though he saw everything happen, David still didn't understand. It was as if something was moving behind the curtain of reality, but he didn't know what it was. I just felt it. A strange feeling that there was something bigger going on. Something no one ever explained to him. Something that maybe was always there, but he never noticed. And it was when a new coincidence appeared that everything began to reveal itself. And you? Have you ever felt like everything seems to go backwards when you share too much of what you are feeling or dreaming? Have you ever noticed that the more you complain, the more things come up that give you reason to keep complaining? It seems absurd, right? But maybe it's not just an impression. David began to realize this with a clarity he hadn't had before. It was as if he was observing his own life from the outside, seeing the invisible threads that connected his thoughts to the things that happened in his everyday life. He noticed the moments when he felt afraid, and almost like a reflex, something would go wrong. Or when he said, even if only in thought, this is going to go wrong. And shortly after, it really did. It felt like the outside world was listening to what he was saying inside. And that scared him, because, until then, he thought his thoughts were just thoughts. But what if they weren't? What if everything he thought, especially when he was silent, had more power than any word said out loud? He started to pay attention. In every small internal reaction, in every sensation that the body delivered when something didn't feel right. He began to remember old conversations, in which he said he was unlucky, or incapable, or someone who wasn't born to be lucky. Loose phrases that he had been repeating for years, and that, now, seemed to have shaped his entire trajectory. The most shocking thing was realizing that it wasn't the others who were playing against him. It was himself. And that's where identification begins. Because maybe, on some level, you have already done this too. Have you ever convinced yourself that it always goes wrong, or that the universe has forgotten about you? Maybe you've gotten so used to frustration that you expect it before you even try, and that creates a vibration, an invisible field that, silently, shapes the experiences around you. David realized that the moments in which his life flowed the most were precisely those in which he felt lightness. It wasn't about being euphoric or thinking positive all the time. It was about being at peace, about silencing the noisy mind that always asked for more. It was when he just trusted that things just happened. And the more he was silent on the outside, the more he heard on the inside. Ideas, perceptions, intuitions began to emerge, as if a new channel had been opened. And the strangest thing was that everything around seemed to respond to it. People changed. The answers arrived. The doors opened, as if reality was, in fact, talking to him. As if everything had always been there, waiting for him to be quiet enough to hear. But it was in a very specific, seemingly banal moment that he saw the confirmation he needed. Something so subtle, but it changed everything. It was on a silent night, with his cell phone in his hand and his soul restless, that David felt he needed to understand more deeply what was happening. This couldn't all be just luck. It couldn't be a coincidence. There was a pattern, an invisible logic behind the events that were unfolding. He needed answers. He started looking for videos, texts, books, anything that could give meaning to what he was experiencing. And that was when, for the first time, he came across the name, Law of Mentalism. At first, it seemed like just another esoteric concept. But the more he read, the more it made sense. The Law of Mentalism said that everything is mind. That external reality is just a projection of what happens inside consciousness. Not what you consciously desire, but what you deeply believe. That hit like a punch in the gut. Because, at that moment, David began to see clearly. He wasn't attracting bad things because of bad luck. He was manifesting what he believed to be true about himself. Decided to test it. He took an old notebook and began to write down, without filter, what he thought about himself. The sentences came naturally, as if they were always there, hidden among automatic thoughts. I'm not good enough. This is difficult for me. It always fails in the end. Nothing I start ever ends. And, reading it in a low voice, he understood. It wasn't the universe that was denying his attempts. He was himself, unconsciously, programmed for failure. Little by little, he decided to do the opposite. He started writing new sentences. At first, they didn't sound real. They sounded forced. A part inside him still doubted. But even so, he wrote, "Everything works out for me. I am invisibly guided. I'm the kind of person who attracts solutions. Life is favoring me, even when it doesn't seem like it." I repeated these phrases every day, especially before bed, when the mind is most open, most vulnerable to reprogramming. And what happened next was not immediate, but it was deep. First, he noticed that the anxiety that had followed him like a constant shadow began to disappear. Not by miracle, but as if it were slowly dissolved by a new energy. Then came clarity. He started to have more accurate ideas, lighter attitudes. I made decisions with more confidence, even without having all the guarantees. And then, the world started to react. Little signs appeared. People who had previously seemed distant now noticed him. Projects that previously stuck flowed. It wasn't a bed of roses, but something was different. Time seemed to work in favor. Unforeseen events came, but they no longer knocked him down. It was as if the universe had recognized a new vibration within him. And, for the first time, he felt it wasn't just his life that was changing. It was him. And it was precisely at this point that something out of the ordinary happened. Something that confirmed, in a way that was impossible to ignore, that he wasn't just believing in a theory. He was living a law. It was on a cloudy Monday, with the smell of rain in the air, that David woke up with the feeling that something was about to get out of control. He couldn't say what, but there was a tension in his chest that he already knew all too well. That energy that always came before some frustration. When he opened the email, the repercussions came immediately. A project he was counting on to pay his monthly bills had been canceled. No warning, no justification, and it was not a small amount. It was what would keep everything in order for the next few weeks. In the past, he would have freaked out. It would have sent messages trying to reverse the situation. I would have panicked, maybe even blamed the universe for yet another injustice. But that day, something about him was different. He just looked at the computer screen, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. He remained silent for a few seconds and said in a low voice, as if he already knew, "If this is happening, it's because the universe knows something that I don't yet know. And let it be. You didn't try to fix it." He didn't look for an immediate solution. He just went about his day, even with uncertainty throbbing in the back of his mind. He went for a walk, listened to music he liked, made simple food. He did everything in peace, even with the absence of what, until yesterday, seemed essential. And it was precisely the next day that the inexplicable happened. Without waiting, he received a message from an unknown number. It was a person who had been recommended by an old contact years ago. This new client not only wanted to hire the same type of project, but also offered 3 times the price. Furthermore, he wanted to close urgently, pay in advance, and even proposed an ongoing contract. It was as if the hole that had been opened had been immediately filled, and even more, enlarged. And it wasn't just that. A late payment for another service, which he had practically forgotten about, hit his account that same day. An unexpected value, coming as if it were a silent reminder that he was no longer operating under the old rules of scarcity. He understood, there, with his entire body. The third key was to trust. Not by word of mouth, but for real. Trust, even when it seems like nothing is working. Trust, even when everything screams that it's wrong. Trust, without demanding immediate signals. Without needing to understand. Since then, he has stopped chasing. Stopped forcing. Stopped trying to push reality. And, little by little, everything started to follow him. Time organized itself in strange ways. The right people showed up. The answers came without being sought. And the most surprising thing was the lightness. The absence of despair. It wasn't magic, although it looked like it. It was law. One that was always there, but that he was only able to access when he silenced the noise of doubt. And it was then that, for the first time, he saw with absolute clarity what had been repeating himself all along. Do you also feel like deep down you were trying to control everything, when really you just needed to let it? Do you notice how reality begins to change when you change inside, and not just in words, but in the silent vibration that emanates from you? This video was more than a story. It was a mirror, a reminder that it's not about running, proving, or convincing. It's about feeling, to choose, and trust the invisible. If something inside you was awakened by this story, comment below the word alignment. This simple word can be your first step to getting out of the struggle and into the flow. And if this message touched your heart, Leave a like now. This will help more people find this light. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to continue on this journey with us.